war in Europe had taken more positive turns for the Allies by June of 1944. The D-Day invasion put them in France and pushing quickly east toward Germany. It was the beginning of a massive Allied drive towards the Nazi homeland. In Italy, Rome had been liberated, and the Allies were pushing north. Russian forces were moving west. Richard Peterson was now incarcerated in Stalag Luft 6 near Lithuania.
Stalag Luft 6, at first, it was not too bad. The Germans used to tell us, for you, the war is over. Well, the war started again. In July of 1944, the Russians were driving through that area. We thought we'd be liberated.
But the German guards had other plans. They were so fearful of what the Russians would do to them, they emptied the camp and moved the prisoners west. When they arrived at the railroad station near their new camp, Stalag Luft 4, they were quickly unloaded.
Then we started walking or marching from the railroad station to the new camp, which was about 1.5 miles. The guards all had bayonets, dogs, and there was a German captain, a red-headed son of a gun, typical Nazi, would drive up and down the column, and he would egg the guards on. And these guards were Hitler Youth, 15, 16-year-old kids. And all of a sudden we were running. Anybody that dropped back, they either put a dog on them or stabbed them with a bayonet. Well, we had 150 of us that either had dog bites or broken legs or rifle butts in the face or bayonet wounds or whatever. It was sometimes called the Heidekrug Run for Your Life or the Bayonet Run. From then on, the treatment was pretty rough.
For Richard Peterson, the winter of 1944-1945 was especially brutal, as it was for the rest of the Allies who had pushed well into France, ironically near the old World War I battlefield of the Ardennes. Here, Hitler made a last desperate effort to keep the Allies from entering the fatherland. It was audacious and bloody. The Battle of the Bulge.
The division that was in front of us had never been in combat, and they were overrun by the Germans, and so our positions were really practically wiped out.
Jerry Weiner was a 20-year-old soldier fighting in the Battle of the Bulge in January 1945. Jerry and his company had been holding off the Germans for several days and were short of everything.
I had no ammunition left, so I finally crawled up onto the road to see where I was, and here are 2 German paratroopers standing there, and why they didn't shoot me I'll never know. I wasn't taking any chances. I threw my dog tags away because on the dog tag it said H for Hebrew. They said Americana. I said, yeah. They said, good. And they took me to their command post. And when I was interrogated, the first question they asked me, well, what religion are you? And I said, Protestant. I wasn't happy about doing that. It was a matter of survival, because eventually they did separate the Jewish prisoners from the non-Jewish prisoners. And they sent them out on special work details. What happened, I can't answer that because I never saw some of them again. They took us out at night to get on the train, 2 straight nights, but the British bombers were over every night. They didn't know that there was a prison compound there.
One of our jobs was to, after we escorted the bombers to the target, was to strafe trains. And later we found out those boxcars were carrying prisoners, but we had no way of knowing that.
Finally, on the 3rd night, There was no rain, and we got in those cars. It was just 3 days and 4 nights of absolute hell. 75 were crammed into the car. You took turns sitting and standing. You could stick to the steel bars across the floor of the car because it was in the middle of winter, and maybe 2/3 of the men had dysentery. There was no food or water for 3 days and 4 nights. They never opened the doors.
Conditions at Stalag 2A near the Baltic Sea were harsh. For 2 months, the prisoners slept on straw mattresses and lived on meager rations.
One day they came in and said, "We're going to evacuate the camp. The Russian army's approaching." And the Germans were terrified of the Russians, for good reason. And we must have marched about 30 to 35 miles a day for maybe a month and a half, 2 months.
This forced winter march of almost 1,000 miles took its toll. Jerry Weiner's body and spirit were severely tested. To help him survive, the Nazi guards let him keep only one personal item, a picture.
The only thing they let me keep was this picture of Ann in a grass skirt. I guess they felt that I needed it worse than they did.
Jerry and I met in high school. I was 15, he was 16. We've been married 59 years, and it's really a love affair. I wrote him constantly, and then I wrote on the back, "When you're sad, just stare at me and I'll dance for you."